Hi, I'm John and welcome to the Jigsaw Puzzler, and have we got a treat for you today. This puzzle here, the World of Sherlock Holmes. This puzzle is 1,000 pieces and it was produced by Lawrence King Publishing Limited. Lawrence King are a very well-known and highly respected art and design publisher, and they have produced a number of jigsaw puzzles in this series, The World of. The design of this puzzle is by Doug John Miller, who is an English illustrator and architectural drawer, and his illustration for this is absolutely beautiful. I have two puzzles in the series. The other one I have is The World of Sherlock Holmes. The other one that I have is The World of Charles Dickens, designed by a different illustrator called Barry Falls. Just pop that one aside and we'll talk about Sherlock Holmes. Right. I love this puzzle. I've done this puzzle several times. It's a really interesting puzzle to do. I'll talk about the quality of the puzzle first and what we actually find. Then we're going to take a tour around the image and look at all the different elements of the image. I'll do a time lapse and we'll have a look at how to solve a puzzle like this one. When we open the box, we of course have a bag of pieces, and there is a poster inside the box. The poster is almost full size. It's double-sided. The front side of the poster has the full illustration of the puzzle on it. The full illustration does not appear on the front of the box, and anyway, if this was the full illustration, there'd be this huge section out of the middle that would be unseeable. There is a small version of it on the back and very, very tiny ones on the side of the lid. Right, so that's what we find in the box. So we open it up and we get the puzzle pieces and we've done the puzzle. The second side of the poster contains information about the puzzle itself. Each of the puzzles in this series are essentially two puzzles in one. The first puzzle is the jigsaw puzzle, putting the pieces together to make the picture that's on the poster. The second puzzle is like a treasure hunt. This particular puzzle has 50 different items to find that relate specifically to the world of Sherlock Holmes. You'll find pictures of characters from his stories, of people who are significant in the Victorian era in the world of Arthur Conan Doyle, the author, and places and objects that relate to the stories themselves. On this side of the page, we've got a detailed description of what it is you can look for, and then a numbered illustration showing what each of those 50 things look like on the puzzle. When we do a tour of the puzzle, we'll look at these in a bit more detail. So let's start out by looking at the quality of the puzzle. As I said, Lawrence King is a very reputable art and design publisher, and the quality of their book publishing is reflected in the quality of the puzzle. The pieces are on relatively thick cardboard, and they're very sturdy. When you put the puzzle together, you can pick it up. So it survives the pickup test. It holds together very well, which means you can do sections outside of the puzzle or in the middle and shuffle them around and move them and add them really, really easily, and I like that. So I've got to say the quality of the puzzle is very high. It has a matte finish, or a mostly matte finish. It's slightly shiny, but nowhere near as shiny as some that I've got. So that makes it easy to see under direct light, or if you've got light coming in through a window or something like that. It does make it okay to see what it is you're looking at. One of the difficult things with this particular puzzle is the colour palette that you're dealing with. It's got very muted colour tones, and I think that's to make it reflect what we imagine Victorian London to be like. foggy, smoky, dark, lots of gloomy corners. And if you read the Sherlock Holmes stories, there is obviously lots of little gloomy corners that Sherlock and John Watson, his offsider, go into in order to solve the crimes they're presented with. All right, so let's talk about, let's have a tour of the puzzle itself. All right, it is an image of Victorian London. There are a lot of elements on here which we would consider to be stereotypical, if you like, of London in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. We see the effects of industrialisation. We have chimney stacks and factories belching out smoke. We have the expansion of the railways. There are 1, 2, 3 trains on it. Actually, I think there might be, oh yes, there's a fourth one. The Underground Railway went through London late in the Victorian period. We see a game of cricket up at the back here, and Arthur Conan Doyle himself was a keen cricketer. That's Lord's, the cricket ground. We see the British Museum here, so it's at the height of the empire and the passion for cataloguing and collecting things from all over the world. We have Parliament down here, a very truncated version of the British Parliament House with the what is now the Queen Elizabeth II Tower, commonly referred to as Big Ben, though that's the actual bell inside it. And we've got Parliament here, we've got the Thames River at the front here with the all-important dockyards that connected London to the rest of the world. So we have this view of London. We have homes of the rich. Up here, some of these here are very well-to-do homes, but then we have some areas which show the poverty and the squalor that some ordinary people experienced in their lives in London. We see a lot of building construction, like over here, there are things being built. We see the red pillar box mailboxes, so the advent of what we know as the postal service came about during the Victorian era, most famously represented by the penny black postage stamp with Queen Victoria's profile on it. So we have lots and lots of elements, small and large, which represent London as the hub of the British Empire in the late 19th century. And this is the world that Arthur Conan Doyle knew as a person growing up, and this is the world that Sherlock Holmes is set in. In addition, we have 4 postcards. They are framed areas to the sides, towards the corners of the puzzle, which have got what looks like an elaborate picture frame, and they've each got a postage stamp on them. One of those Queen Victoria portrait stamps on it, as if they are postcards from somewhere outside of London. The first one over here is of Surrey, which is one of the counties outside of London. And we have an image on there. We have a cutaway view of a house, and there is a person in the house, and there is, if you look very carefully, a green snake coming in through the roof of the house. This is a reference to Dr. Grimesby Roylott and the story of the Speckled Band. We have a woman here on a bicycle, the solitary cyclist, Violet Smith, being pursued by an unknown pursuer. And so that refers to 2 specific stories in the Sherlock Holmes canon that happened in Surrey. Over on this corner, we have Sussex, another county not far out of London, but it was in the countryside at the time. We have the harpooning of a ship's captain named Peter Carey from the story The Adventure of Black Peter. And we have another cutaway view of a house with a cellar underneath, and there is the body of a man over a chest. And that is Richard Brunton, and the reference to the short story The Musgrave Ritual. This corner here, probably the most dramatic event in all of the Sherlock Holmes stories. This postcard comes from the Reichenbach Falls in Switzerland. This is where Sherlock Holmes and his arch-enemy, Dr. James Moriarty, finally face each other off in the flesh, rather than just moving their pawns like a chessboard around each other in the crimes that go on in London. Dr. James Moriarty, described by Sherlock Holmes himself as the Napoleon of crime, and Holmes face each other off and physically fight each other on the precipice above the Reichenbach Falls in Switzerland. And as we know from the stories, both of them plunge over the falls. All right, and then in this corner here, we have a postcard from Dartmoor, down in the southwestern part of England. Again, there are two stories represented here. The first one, there is a horse and his dead trainer, or its dead trainer, on the ground there, and the horse is Silver Blaze. And that's the story of the Silver Blaze, about a stolen racehorse. Probably the source of the most famous quoted line in all of Sherlock Holmes, about the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. That comes from the story of the Silver Blaze. The other story, taking up the bulk of the postcard, shows this very gloomy mansion in the middle of Dartmoor. There's a gentleman outside holding a butterfly net, and then over in the back corner there is a deceased gentleman, Sir Charles Baskerville, presided over by a great hound. And this, of course, is probably one of the most famous Sherlock Holmes stories of all, The Hound of the Baskervilles. All right, in the middle of the puzzle, there is this circular element. It is, in fact, a magnifying glass, and there's a handle and the glass itself, and it zooms in on this prominent building in the middle of the puzzle, which is 221B Baker Street, the residence of Sherlock Holmes and Dr. John Watson, and their housekeeper, their very long-suffering housekeeper, Mrs. Hudson. Inside the magnifying glass, we see Sherlock Holmes by the fire, and we see Dr. John Watson, and we see Mrs. Hudson coming in with a tea tray. Around the puzzle, there are lots and lots of other things. In the front here, there is the Diogenes Club, a fictitious gentleman's club that Sherlock's brother Mycroft belongs to. He is a recluse, but he works for the government in many secret and shady activities, but appears never to go anywhere other than the Diogenes Club. We have the Criterion here, which is a hotel with a restaurant in it. We have this building here, and there's a woman outside. I think this is a theatre from memory. And the woman outside in blue is Mary Marston. She is the instigator of she brings the problem to Sherlock Holmes that unfolds into the Sign of Four, the story of the Sign of Four, which is one of the 4 novellas that Conan Doyle produced for Sherlock Holmes. Mary Marston becomes Dr. John Watson's wife, Mrs. Watson. So she is represented there. There are all sorts of other figures on here. So we have, in terms of Sherlock's arch enemies, there are 3 prominent individuals. Obviously, James Moriarty is the villain par excellence in the Sherlock Holmes stories, and he's here fighting Sherlock on the Reichenbach Falls. But there are 2 other prominent villains in the stories. The first of whom is Irene Adler. Irene Adler comes to prominence in the story A Scandal in Bohemia, one of the earliest Sherlock Holmes stories, and she is Sherlock's intellectual equal, and Sherlock admires her tremendously. She actually gets away with her crime. She's not brought to justice, and Sherlock certainly admires the quality of her work, even if not what she's actually doing. The third arch villain here is Charles Augustus Milverton and his rather gloomy mock Gothic mansion. Charles Augustus Milverton, is a completely odious individual who is a blackmailer. And he is the only way that he is brought to justice in the end is to have Sherlock Holmes actually kill him himself. There is a great chase scene in the story that appears in, where the police are chasing Sherlock and Dr. Watson in the dark through the countryside. But the only way that Sherlock can actually deal with this man is to get rid of him himself. Now that stands as a precursor for other detective stories like Hercule Poirot with Agatha Christie. And in fact, in the very last Hercule Poirot story, it transpires that Hercule himself is the murderer. So that this is the precedent for that much later story. And lots of detail here. So yes, and plenty to look at. So we're not just looking at the elements of the Sherlock Holmes stories here either. The illustrator, Doug John Miller, has paid tribute to the crime fiction genre at the time. Down the front here, for example, this gentleman here standing on the bridge is Edgar Allan Poe. And Edgar Allan Poe is widely recognised as the author of the very first detective novel, The Murders in the Rue Morgue. He was an American author, and he is seen as the originator of this as a fiction genre. And so Conan Doyle very much would have known very much of Edgar Allan Poe's work, and Miller has paid tribute to that here. Arthur Conan Doyle himself appears up the back here at Lord's Cricket Ground with a little table doing some writing. And there are various other references. William Gladstone, the Prime Minister, appears here. There are women down the front here who are suffragettes, campaigning for votes for women. So there are all sorts of tiny details all over the puzzle that attract your attention. If we look close here, there is a small cutaway to the Underground Railway, and we can see a train whizzing past in each direction. And on the platform in between, we can see the body of Arthur Cadogan West from the adventure of the Bruce Partington plans, where he was accused of selling state secrets to foreign powers. So lots and lots of details that mean something for those who are aficionados of the Sherlock Holmes stories. 50 details that you can pick up: people, places, and objects. If you look very, very closely, and it does take a while to find these, but as you're doing it, you'll notice something that is just kind of floating in space out of place. So for instance, over here, next to this building, we can see there is a pipe, a smoking pipe, just hovering in space. Little kind of glowing background behind it as if it's somehow supernaturally powered, but just sitting there. Over here on the roof of this building, we see a Persian slipper. Down here, again with a glowing background, over here with a glowing background behind it, in front of these barrels, we see a violin. There are half a dozen small objects like that which connect to Sherlock Holmes as a person on the puzzle. And they are there for people to look for as well. So we've got the puzzle itself, the actual jigsaw with the pieces, and then we've got this other treasure hunt looking for all the people, the places, the objects, the stories that connect to make this the world of Sherlock Holmes. And it's a terrific puzzle to do. Really thoroughly enjoyable. All right, so how did I do this puzzle? What are my tips for doing this? Well, I did the border first. This is an easy border first puzzle. There is so much variation around the edges that it is not difficult to do. I put all the border pieces out, and I started with the bottom edge with the blue and put it together. Then I put started piecing all the rest of it together. The green at the top is the most difficult. It's not very difficult, but it's the challenging bit. But there's enough variation. There's a railway line here, there are the postcards here, there's buildings here, there's different changes of colour. This section in this whole corner here is really faded out and foggy. So the border itself is not a challenge. So once you get that in place, you know how big the puzzle is you're dealing with. Then I pieced together these two postcards. This pink sky, this sort of sunsetty sky on the Sussex postcard, and this bright blue on the Surrey postcard were very easy to pull the pieces out for. So I pulled those out, and at the same time I pulled out all the blue for the river. There is not a lot of blue on it. It looks like a bit, but there isn't really. And what that gives you is an edge for all the rest of those pieces down the bottom. It means you can then start to follow the line of this railway line and this bridge and this railway line. You can start to connect those bits together. At the top, we have this very distinctive railway line here. It looks like none of the others. That texture is quite distinct, and it's not hard to pick those pieces out. And in fact, it's actually not that hard to pick out the green parts at the top. And you'll see in the time lapse that early on, I ended up doing most of the green at the top before a lot of the buildings and the busyness in the middle. You can pick out the ring for the magnifying glass, so that's not hard to find, although the handle is a bit trickier to find. It's a bit harder to recognise when it's in pieces, but I did that. So I did the border, I did the water, I did the sky parts for Sussex and Surrey, and I pulled out the pieces for the Reichenbach Falls. They have a really distinct texture. They're kind of smoky and as if, you know, we're looking through the spray of a waterfall. And so they do look texturally different. Even from the puffs of smoke around from the factories and steam trains, they do look different in the box. So I pulled those out. I didn't do them for a while because that's not as easy as these two. And then I decided to pull out the frames, the picture frames, all the pieces that I could see for the 4 picture frames, and put those together. Then, so I had the 4 frames, the border, the water, and some of the green. And this building here, 221B Baker Street, is really the largest building on the puzzle. Even though an architectural illustrator has drawn this, beautifully drawn it, you can tell that he's trained as an architect or an architectural draftsman. The proportions are not right. This is the most prominent building in the picture, but it is larger, significantly larger than any of the other ones around it, including the ones that are closer to us at the front. So our sense of perspective is a bit warped with this. Sometimes people at the back are larger than people at the front. So our sense of perspective is a bit skewed, but the focus is on 221B Baker Street. That being the case, this had more pieces in the box than any other building on the puzzle, and so it wasn't too hard to pick those out. Similarly, the architecture of the Houses of Parliament and the tower, the clock tower, not too difficult to pick out. All these very distinct stripes on the tower, and then the vertical stripes excuse me, on the neo-Gothic Houses of Parliament themselves. Then you start to notice, start to pick out different colours. The first thing I did was go for red. There's not a lot of actual red on this puzzle. So, but it appears in a couple of ways. Firstly, the sides of these train carriages are red. Secondly, the pillar boxes for the post are all red, and they all go in particular spots. Thirdly, we've got these awnings, the shop awnings here. And fourthly, we then have the dress of Irene Adler. So to pick out all the red is not a lot, but it means you can start to place parts of the puzzle approximately where they're going to end up to kind of narrow it down so that we don't have just a mass of stuff that we're sifting through. And just like Sherlock Holmes became an expert on I don't know how many different varieties of tobacco ash, well, when you're doing a puzzle like this, you feel like you're becoming an expert on window styles. I don't know how many window styles there are here, but you end up looking for them. These windows are different to these windows. Those windows are different from these windows. And all over the puzzle, every building has different windows and wall textures and wall colours. And you end up starting to look for those. After a while, it changes to chimney pots. There are probably hundreds of chimney pots here. Some big like these, some small like these down here. And you end up thinking, I'm going to become an expert in Victorian chimney pots once I finish this. And they are the clues, the keys that you need to be able to put the buildings in their right places. The windows are the key. Once you've got that, the roofs become a lot easier. The roofs are quite difficult. If you just went for that, it would be a bit of a job just to sort out the roofs on their own. There's a lot that are the same or very, very similar colours. There are a lot that are the same shape. This roof is the same as that, which are very similar to those. This roof is the same colour as some of these down here, or the same shape as that one. So by picking out the facades of the buildings using the windows and putting them roughly in place, you end up chipping away at the more difficult roof line of each of the buildings. And then it was just a matter of sifting through the puzzle boxes, as I do like to do, and look for, what do I recognise? What colour do I recognise? What texture do I recognise? What windows do I recognise? What people do I recognise? There's a horse and trap here and here. So there, you can pick out, there are 3 horses on it. So there's the silver blaze, obviously, and then there are these 2 here. So if you find horses, we know where they go. The drifts of smoke coming out of the chimneys and out of the steam trains, I started pulling out those pieces. You just get little slivers of smoke. But if you can piece those together, you get another small portion of the puzzle that starts to join on with the other bits that you might have around. What happens with this puzzle, I found, is that you end up with a bunch of small puzzles that eventually get bigger and bigger until they touch and connect, and they start to congeal almost into one large image, and then you're just left with the spaces. Right at the end, I did sort by shape. The beauty of a puzzle like this is that pieces go one way up. So whether it was, let me just take a section apart here. Take these 2 pieces. 2 very ordinary common piece shapes. Right, oh no, not you. I'll take you and you. Right, 2 very, very ordinary common piece shapes. Because they have people on them, or they have objects on them, they have parts of buildings, windows, doors, all sorts of things like that. You can tell which way up they go. So I was able to, even though they are, 2 tabs in and 2 out, you can tell, I could line up everything that belonged to both of those shapes, whether they went horizontally or vertically, and then just work my way around the puzzle to fill in everything at the end. There are some pieces which are the unusual shapes, but not a huge number of them. I had some left at the end, and they were really easy to find the places where they got put in. But because there are lots and lots of small people, and you can tell which way up a person goes, you could puzzle sort the pieces very, very easily. So that helped to make this enjoyable. I think the overall gloomy colour tone makes it a bit of a challenge, but on the whole, this is a pleasure of a puzzle to do. I have done the Charles Dickens one as well and found exactly the same thing with it, that it is also similarly busy picture, but very achievable in much the same way. It can be done in sections and parts, and come together as you add more and more to each section. So there's my review of this puzzle. I like these. There's a whole series of them, mostly literary related, but there are some art related ones. I have seen one which is the World of Salvador Dali. I've completed the world of Agatha Christie, but there are loads and loads. There's Bridgerton, if you like the period drama TV series. There are loads and loads of these, catering for a huge range of tastes. And I happen to be a Sherlock Holmes fan, and have been for a very long time. So this I found very pleasurable to do. And because I knew most of the stories, or remembered a lot of the stories, it made doing the puzzle that much more interesting when I could see something. I thought, I know what that is. I know what the speckled band is. I remember that story and how it was solved. I know about Silver Blaze. I know about the Hound at the Baskervilles. I know what happened at the Reichenbach Falls and what happens afterwards. I know about the nasty Charles Augustus Milverton. And all of these things, I get a sense of Victorian London and Victorian England from this. A great pleasure to do. I thoroughly recommend not only this puzzle, but any of the puzzles in the series. I expect that people will find them a sheer joy to do. If you can click like or subscribe underneath, that would help me greatly. Let's get into the world of Sherlock Holmes. Thank you.